Hi guys, welcome back to Miss Finance. On this channel I go through all things accounting, finance and investment related, so if you like this kind of stuff do consider subscribing, and otherwise let's get straight into the video. Now, in today's video I thought I'd talk to you very quickly about how to prepare for an interview. So you might be an individual who's currently studying level 2, level 3 or even level 4 at AAT. Maybe you've even started self-studying towards an accounting qualification with a university, maybe an open university for example, but you haven't quite landed that first role within a finance department, or whether that be in either practice or industry. So I've spoken to you before today on a prior video about what the difference between practice and industry is. So I'll just go over that very quickly. So practice is just what we refer to when we're talking about accountants who work within an accountancy practice. So individuals who work at BDO, KPMG, PwC and any other practice firm, whereas industry is basically where you're working within a company. So the likes of when you're working for BT for example, or you're working for a manufacturing company but in their finance department. So you might be just at the very beginning where you're just starting to have a look on the likes of like Reed, Indeed, LinkedIn, that sort of thing. Or you might have already found a job, applied for it, and at the point where you've now been invited for an interview. So well done if you're at that point, that's brilliant news. But if you're an individual who's just starting to look, there's a few things that might be giving you a little bit of doubt. So what I'd say is when you're looking at these job roles, if you are at an entry level, so you've never had a job within a finance department or anything similar, then I would definitely be looking at jobs like trainee business advisor, trainee accountant, accounts assistant, accounts junior, those sort of roles, because within those roles you're going to be provided with the relevant training and guidance that you need in order to progress within your career. Whereas if you're an individual who's managed staff before today, you've adhered to deadlines in a prior role, so maybe you're an individual who's worked in an office environment before today, but when you're having a look at job roles you're unsure as to whether or not you fit the bill of what it is that they're looking at. But I'll let you in on a little secret. When those job roles are specified, they're usually specified by an individual within the business who has a general idea of the type of candidate that they're looking at. And a lot of the time when you scroll down on these roles that are available, you'll see a list of required skills such as the ability to use Excel, the ability to use Word, maybe the ability to pick up systems quickly, that sort of thing. Or maybe they might say AAT level 2, level 3 or level 4 is required. But if you look further down, they'll have a list of desirables, and all that is a list of desired qualities that they would like you to have, but they're not necessary for the job. And I wish that more job roles would actually specify this, because sometimes when you're having a look at the list of requirements on a job, say for a month-end management accounting, the list just goes on and on and on and on, and there might be 3, 4, maybe even 5 things on that list, or even more, that you've never come across before. You don't really know what it is. Maybe you've never dealt with cash flows before today, and that's listed on there and you're thinking, well, I can't go for this job because I haven't dealt with cash flows, I haven't dealt with cash flow forecasting other than on paper in my AAT exam. So you might put yourself off, when actually a lot of the skills that are required you can learn on the job. And my tip to you would be to go into the interview with the acknowledgement and the confidence to say to the individual who's undertaking the interview and say, okay, I understand that you have this listed on the job specification, however I don't have any prior experience with cash flows, but I'm willing to put in the effort and learn exactly how they work within your company so that I can take this on as well, and then go on to list your good points, how you fit the job specification required, other than this point for example. So my other tip when searching for a job, and definitely when you're in the interview, is just to be completely honest, because if you lie in your interview, sooner or later you're going to be picked up on it. But it's best to say there and then that actually, you know, there's a few things that you've not seen before, or maybe something that you haven't had exposure to would be a better way of saying it, so that then you're giving them the opportunity to give you the tools to undertake everything that they've listed on that job role. And it's actually very difficult to find an individual who does have every single one of those qualities that are specified on there. And a lot of the time recruiters will advise companies not to be so specific, because you do put off candidates by having this long list of requirements in a job role. So you'll see actually that a lot of the job roles sometimes are only this long, and they're a very summarised version of what they want from an ideal candidate. So if you see a long list of requirements, don't be put off by any means. Now, Now, my other tip when you're going into an interview or before you get an interview is please do read that job candidate role again and again and again so that you can tailor your responses to the questions that they might ask in relation to that job role. So for example, if they're speaking about have you had any prior experience working to a deadline, make sure that you've got an example of a time that you've had to work to a deadline. And that doesn't have to be work related, it could be study related. And when you're actually answering these questions in an interview, I would specifically state that. So if you're asked in an interview to give an example of a time that you've had to work to a deadline, you can specifically state, I haven't had the opportunity to work to a deadline within a work environment as yet. However, during my studies of AAT, for example, I had to work to many deadlines in order to adhere to the exam timetable, for example. So there's a way of turning around the questions that they ask you sometimes if you genuinely don't have an example to give, just for that to work in your favour a little bit better. But one thing that I would avoid doing is to make up an answer, something that just isn't true and hasn't happened. I just stick to telling the truth at all points in an interview. Now, my final tip would be to make sure that you research the company that you're having an interview for and research the individual who's doing the interview. So research their background, research what the company does. Maybe you can have a look at their accounts on Companies House, for example. You can see what their performance has been in the past, for example, and you can even bring that up as part of the interview process as well to show that you've got a genuine interest in the company and what they're doing. And I would specifically pay a lot of attention to their values, because once again, you can almost tailor the values that they've got as a company to your answers when they're asking you questions about, say for example, on a personal level, what matters most to you. My last tip would be just a very general tip in that I would just practice. So practice your answers, maybe sit with a family member and go through the type of questions that you might be asked and give an answer back, because if you're a very nervous person, like what I used to be, I used to sit in an interview and my hands were trembling, so I had to learn to literally hold my hands under the table to stop myself from trembling, or I'd have these really annoying nervous habits like biting my fingers during an interview or looking down a lot, that sort of thing. So you've got to just try and work on your body language and your answers before you get into an interview. So I hope you found all of this useful. Do consider subscribing as always, and I shall see you on the next video.